Peace, everyone. Unmask Art here. Welcome back to another live critique. I have a lot of projects here. Sorry for the slightly late start. I had just remembered that I got emailed a couple projects and then also sent some on Discord. That's the struggle of having multiple places to submit your projects. So I'm going to just jump right in because like I said, I have a lot to go through. So try not to take like 5 hours to get through them all because, I love doing these critiques and sometimes I get caught up in explaining things. Real quick, hello, Barbara, Linda, Susan, Orlean, Diane, Claire, Victor, Cherry, Marcy, anybody else that I may have missed. Crazy weather. I think it was like yesterday I was talking about how nice the weather has been here. I woke up this morning, everything is covered in snow. It's just wild. Um, Anyways, let's get into the first project here from Zayar. Uh, this lovely little flower piece. I don't know what medium this is done in. It sort of looks like a mix between watercolor and colored pencil, possibly just watercolor pencils. So not 100% sure which medium, but I'm pretty sure the background's watercolor. It looks watercolor. The base coloring of the flowers and the stems and stuff look like watercolor, but then they have the texture of colored pencil on top. So I could be wrong there, not 100% sure. And this one, I did a little bit of color correction because the photograph looked a little off, but hopefully I sort of got it better, closer to what it looks like originally. And this is really good. Great composition here. Lovely colors. I think, truthfully, there's only one way that I would describe to help improve this piece because it's already so well done, and that's just more contrast. So establish a little bit of light. And so I will do that here. I'll just take my brush and I don't know which direction the light source is coming from, so I'm just going to make it up. I'm going to say that the light source is coming from here, okay? So that means everything on this side of the flower will be darker. So I'm just going to throw in some black really quick to do this to demonstrate exactly where the shadows would be. But aside from the flowers themselves, you would have the stems being darker on that side. Ignore the fact that this is truly black. I'll fix that in a moment. But also you have some cast shadows from the leaves. So maybe that would be black. Maybe this whole side would be black. It's tough to say because you don't see the form of the petals or of the stems. So I can't say for sure which direction the light is supposed to be coming from the original reference. All right, so we got that. Let's do multiply and colorize. And let's change the saturation a bit. Maybe make it sort of bluish. So a little bit of blue light, something around there. I'll just quickly blur it so that it's not so that, and then I'll just turn down the opacity. And so there's a little bit more light sort of coming from the right side with some shadows. I can do right mixture of settings here. There we go. That's a little bit better. So if you create a sensation of light, you're going to have some uniform shadows across your flowers, and it's just going to sort of help it stand out a little bit more. It's going to give you some darker values. So that's really what's missing in this project. And I think if you added that, it would immediately look better. It would sort of stand off the paper a little bit more. Maybe it doesn't need to be this dark. Even if it's just slightly darker, as long as you show a bit of a light source, then you're going to make your objects appear more three-dimensional. You're just going to make it more pleasing to look at overall. So that's really the only direction I would take this. Also, um, one last bit of advice. Don't be afraid to mix in other colors. So for instance, this yellow flower is like perfectly yellow, but odds are it probably has some orange in there too. So you could use some orange. Let's go even more orange, shall we? You could throw in some orange to make the color of the flower a bit more unique and less uniform, because uniformity doesn't really exist in nature. So you sort of have a spectrum of color that's going to exist even within a yellow flower. You're going to have some orange, maybe you'll have some browns or something like that. You'll have a variation of colors. So make sure that you don't uniformity immediately looks unnatural. And so since you're doing natural plants here, you want to use a bit more color range there. But otherwise, good work. Keep it up. Thank you for the submission. All right, I'm going to do a whole bunch of Linda's work here. I got 4 pieces from Linda. Hey there, Chandri. Hello, Chris. Realistic Creations, Dottie. Godo, I think. Uh, my katakana is kind of bad, but konnichiwa. Um, anyways, I'll try to keep up with any questions. And if I happen to miss your question, feel free to ask it again. All right, so this was technically a pastel project that I did last week, but Linda always likes to do her projects in colored pencil. So she did the orange project or the tangerine project with colored pencils, and it came out quite nice. I think like the colors really, really close. I mean, looking at my own project over here behind me, the colors are really close. So the translation between the pastel colors that I used and the colored pencils, you did really, really well on it. The background, lacks a little bit of smoothness. If there was any way to get your background smoother, you're going to immediately draw more attention to the foreground. So I think you mentioned what paper you're working on. I think it was the Clairefontaine paint on paper, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm trying to remember like all the little details that people put into their artwork when they posted it, but odds are I'm going to get something, or if not everything, wrong about that. Uh, Hello, Sally. Good to see you. But yeah, if you could smooth out the background a bit more, that's going to bring more attention to the foreground, soften those textures in the back. The orange looks really good. I think the biggest issue is this shadow here. So you sort of have this zigzag line that goes like this, and it's really noticeable. And perhaps if you perhaps like smoothed out the transition between the orange and this sort of odd shadow, and made that transition not so zigzag, not have sort of this awkward pattern and such a distinct stopping point. Also, there's a bit of red missing in the transition. Remember, there's a lot of red that takes place right through here. And you get that red in the transition and also in the shadow itself. So that red needs to be a bit deeper, and that's going to make the black that you used for the really dark shadows transition into the colors of the orange much more naturally. Aside from that, it looks pretty good. The wood table or plank of wood that the orange is sitting on, the direction shifts a little bit. So your directionality is just a tiny bit off with your wood grain. So it's pretty horizontal here, and then you have it curving up. Maybe I'll make this line a little bit thicker. So you sort of have it curving up over here. And that's a trend that I see throughout the wood grain. The wood grain's not doing that, so it makes it look less realistic. As soon as you shift that wood grain, it should be horizontal. So here's a horizontal line, and here's sort of the direction that you have going on, and it's sort of only happening right here. So that's one thing with the wood grain. Make sure your lines are nice and horizontal because you're looking at the plank sort of like this, and that's going to squish those horizontal lines even tighter. Other than that, yeah, looks good. Looks good. Let's move on to Linda's. So here's before, here's after. Let's move on to Linda's male figure here. And Linda, you did really, really good job here. This is definitely one of the more difficult projects that we've done in the past year. Well, I'm a little biased because I consider figures and portraits to be sort of the most difficult. Anything that really revolves around anatomy and skin tones, because a lot of people really struggle with getting good skin tones. Here you got some nice oranges. I can see the yellows in there, nice reds in the shadows. It came out really good. It came out really good. The hair's really nice. I can see the details that you put in. Very bright highlights, giving him that sort of like strawberry blonde color in his hair, and it looks really good. The leotard, there's not much to discuss about the leotard. It's sort of just something that I wish wasn't even in the reference photo, but since it was, good color choice. Blue, sort of a blue teal, complements the orange in the skin and the hair, so the really good color choice there. Um, Now the form of his muscles is a little bit sharp, and what I mean by that, let me grab a brush here. It's obvious color. So this part of his muscle, like that's where his shoulder blade is coming in as he's like shifting his shoulder or his arm backwards, so it's sort of pinching his shoulder blade against his spine. That part right there is just a little bit sharp, and then also right here with his other shoulder blade. Now these shadows here were really dark, and it's good that you got them really dark, but you also needed to uh, smooth out the gradient a little bit more in those pinch points. Same thing right here where his tricep begins on his arm, just a little bit too sharp there. Um, Everywhere else looks good, like along his spine, the really nice deep shadow giving that nice depth around his lateral muscles. Um, Sort of doing this off of memory here, but uh, this lateral muscle here should be formed a bit better. So this shadow here that runs down, um, this part should be, this highlight should be stretched over here just a little bit more, because he has both these lateral muscles that run down his back. And so it looks like his rib cage, this shadow is coming in a bit too far, and it's shrinking his lateral muscle. It's sort of making it look asymmetrical here, um, in size, not necessarily the uh, like the structure of it, because obviously his back is twisting and his arms are in different positions, so his muscles will be stretched and pulled in different ways. Um, but that just looks, this highlight here just looks a little bit shifted to the right. Um, let's see. The hands look good. The hands are difficult. They're small. You could have been a bit darker on his fingers on his right hand. His left hand looks good. Yeah, the left hand looks pretty good. This shadow looks a little bit too high on his hand. So this is that chunky part of the pinky, and it looks like it should be a little bit more in towards the center of his palm. So that line looks like it should be down just a little bit. Yeah, other than that, yeah, it looks good. Probably could have used a little bit more layers. I think it was white. I think I used white quite a bit to do some smoothing. So you could have used the white pencil, not necessarily like with a high pressure to turn things white, but if you had used the white pencil to smooth out some of the skin, you could have maybe gotten rid of a little bit of that grainy texture in his skin. And that, I think that would have came out nicely. But yeah, other than that, yeah, it looks super good. Fantastic job on a difficult project. Now, Linda, I wasn't 100% sure if you were submitting this piece. You sent it to me in Discord. I hope that you're submitting it and I'm not showing it. I'm not showing something you didn't want to be shown. But I thought this was a really good piece to show because this is 1 point perspective. Like this is a project that Linda did on her own. This is the reference photo that she sent me, and you can see that the she did it zoomed in. So if you look here, her piece starts like I think I drew on that. Yeah. Let me. Okay. Yeah. So her piece starts zoomed in here, sort of like right in this spot. So it's sort of like this. She did that section right there, if you see. And it's cool because this is in 1 point perspective. So this gives me an opportunity to sort of revisit some of the 1 point perspective stuff that I went over on Monday and Tuesday. The perspective is pretty close. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. What I want to do first is actually I want to look at the original photo because oftentimes, we sort of think of perspective drawing as just being sort of this art thing and it not really something that's practical. But if we just let me get rid of this stuff. So can you stop? Oh, this is trying to get me. I don't even know what this is. What is this? Why did it do that? Never seen that before in my life. There we go. I don't know why this eraser is not working. Eraser? There we go. Okay. I just wanted to get rid of those lines there. I don't know why I had to make it so hard on myself. Okay, so let's follow this edge. Yeah, that's pretty close. Let's follow the top of this. So there we go. There's our vanishing point. I'm going to use yellow, I guess. So there's our vanishing point. So if I switch back to this fuchsia color, I can come down here and boom. I can come down here and watch the sidewalk and the bench, the back of the bench here, the part of the bench. Oh, look at that. The dividing line in the road. Oh, look, it's just like magic. How about the bottoms of the car? The trunks and hoods of the car? The tops of these cars, they're generally the same height, so you can get pretty close there. How about the top of this building here? Oh, would you look at that? It's like magic, right? What about this building all the way over here? Oh, they all converge. Oh, what I forgot about this fence here. What about this fence? Does this fit? Oh, would you look at that? It's like magic, right? 1 point perspective, all of these lines just going straight to this center point. And this is a photograph. This is real life, right? So it has practical use, and so this is what you recognize, and then you use this in your art. So let's have a look at your drawing, and I can. When I looked at this, I knew that it was out of the perspective was off. You have like 5 vanishing points that I can see just immediately. which for 1 point perspective is not what you want to aim for. You want to aim for that convergent point because that makes it look correct as far as perspective goes. And I had mentioned a perspective in a couple of your previous submissions. I think last month there was a couple projects that you did that I brought up, like the perspective was not quite correct with some of your still life projects. Those were 2 point perspective, so it was a little bit more complex than this. But if we just follow these lines here, oops, that is not the right button. If we follow this line, yeah, that's like, yep, that's a little bit off. Let's see here. Let's go from the fence. That is a little bit off. Probably about here, I think. Nope. It's hard to judge this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we'll continue this line. Yeah, something like that. And so here's the vanishing point from the top of the fence. So let's see if we can use this for the bricks. We can't use that for the bricks. So the bricks are off, at least if I use the fence. So let's back up here. And this is what a viewer's mind sort of has when they try to figure out what feels off about the project, or what feels off about the perspective, rather. What I'm going to do, I'm going to draw a line here, and then I'll just transform it. So I'll line this up with the road because that one's pretty easy. But yeah, there we go. So there's that. And then let's take another line and let's use, I think the top side of the brick is probably the best. So I'm trying to use the information you have in your drawing here to find the vanishing point, because that's really what your eye wants to try to get to. Let me just merge these layers. So here's sort of the vanishing point that I can sort of get, is this green right here. And let's just look at some of the objects in the scene to see how good or not so good the other objects fall in line. So we'll start here and let's come across the benches. The benches are pretty good. This one sneaks out just a little bit. The top side of the bench. Okay, so this one peeks out a little bit too much, but it looks like the brick, the brick is just slightly off. Let me go here to here. So that's kind of the top of the benches, and you can see the bricks are changing. The bricks are not quite, that one's pretty close, but then it sort of creeps over to the left, so it starts to break perspective right around here, with pretty much most of the bricks sort of breaking perspective. If I come to the top of the fence here, you can see that this part here is breaking perspective. Let's do the center line of the road, since the center line should be the distance from here should be the same distance of here in the real world. That should be the same, like 8-foot distance or something. And it's pretty close. You can see it's sort of coming up a little bit over here. So the perspective of the road is converging on the same point. That's good. This roof here, yeah, that roof there looks like it's breaking perspective. Yeah, so it's coming out here. It's coming out like that, so it's a little bit off. So as far as the 1-point perspective goes, a majority of the stuff is sort of close. So it's sort of close, but especially the bricks on the walls The bricks on the walls are probably the worst uh, offenders as far as breaking the perspective, but everything else is quite good. Um, the fence it will be horizontal, then it drops down and it comes horizontal again. So that's good. Yeah, those horizontal lines. The vertical lines, the house is a little out of vertical. The fence here, nice vertical lines. Yes, the bricks right here, nice vertical lines. The telephone pole, it leans a little bit to the left, but it's fine. It's totally fine. This one leans a little bit further to the left. That one's good. Yeah, for the most part, the vertical lines, I'd say like 98%. Like on the vertical lines, very close. The house is probably the worst offender as it kicks out like this, sort of creates this leaning wall. It sort of makes the house there look a little bit leaning. But overall, perspective wise, you know, I would give this a solid. If I was to give it a letter grade, I'd give it a solid like B plus because there's a lot of objects in here. The fence in the background moves to a flat, like a two-dimensional fence. So the nice horizontal and vertical lines look good. A majority of the vertical lines are correct, with the exception of the house. Um, and it's really just the bricks here that are breaking the perspective. But overall, really, really well done. And I'm just going to talk about the perspective on that project. All right. So thank you so much for the submissions, Linda. I appreciate that. All right. Up next is Chris, and this is her male figure project, and similar color choice as far as the blue goes. Hold on. Let me take a second before I carry on and make sure I didn't miss any questions. Okie dokie. I don't think I missed anything, hopefully. All right. So, Chris's project here, yeah, it looks good. The paper, um, I don't remember if you mentioned the paper choice, but the paper, I like the color and the texture in the paper. It looks really cool. Kind of looks like recycled sawdust or something. Yeah, it looks really cool. Uh, right off the bat, careful with the graphite transfer lines. Yeah, I can see a little bit of your graphite showing through, uh, especially like here around the highlights on the arms. I know that's tough. That's tough to get rid of. Um, and when you apply the colored pencil over top of it, it's next to impossible to fix, and it can create some muddiness. So just be wary of that. Um, you could have gone darker in the spaces here, like along the spine. Uh, this spot was rather dark, like next to pure black. Um, the spacing on the rib cage right around here, it looks a little wide. Looks a little wide. It feels like his rib, like his actual rib bones are thicker than they should be. And I think he has four four ribs that are sort of showing through there as he leans. Uh, I like the colors that are showing through. The shadows are really what's sort of lacking. The shadows are lacking a little bit of depth, which is not giving you the full form that you want to create with this project. So remember when we were working through this project, I was sort of reminding everybody that you need to push your colors and your values to the point of messing up. You need to feel like you're about to mess up, and it would be better in this case. It would be better for you to have used like a really dark value in his spine area and it be too dark. It would be better for it to be too dark than for it to be not dark enough. Because at the very least, you're going to get more contrast over the whole project. And so I think that you could have pushed a little bit farther with the values. Uh, it it seems a little like these lines here are sort of drawn in, and you also want to create the transition for those areas. So that's what's going to create the roundness or the form of his muscles and give you the structure that you're looking for. Um, this I know that his armpit, the little part of his armpit was showing there, and that should be noticeably darker. And sort of right here you can see that it's just connecting to bicep, and it doesn't really have a distinction, which in the reference photo it has a clear distinction. um, this whole area of his back, his like back shoulder, shoulder blade, and middle back was darker. So that area should be noticeably darker, because one of the things that when you look at your drawing here, just ask yourself, where is the light coming from? And from this particular way that you applied your shadows and the lighter colors, there's not a clear distinction as to whether the light is in front of him or beside him. Uh, Pretty much everybody's going to recognize to some degree that the light is sort of coming from this direction, but because these areas, especially around here, aren't very dark in comparison to something in this area, you can't tell whether the light is coming from beside him or in front of him. And so that leaves it a little bit ambiguous. Um, I'm not going to really talk about the leotard because again, I didn't really care for it in the reference photo. Um, but you could have applied a little bit more texture and color variation. So like a different shade of blue as it transitions from the shadows to the base color, and then also highlights. The highlight could come in as well, because right here it sort of just looks like two colors, and not really any form shadows. So you have some of the dark shadows and the shapes from the line art, but no real form shadows. So just to clarify, a form shadow should be a gradient. Um, Form shadow is almost always, I can't really think of a form shadow that's not a gradient of some degree. Grass paper, interesting. All right, so I'm going to move on uh, to this portrait that Chris drew, and I'm not sure. I didn't see a reference photo for this, so I don't know exactly what this individual's supposed to look like. But just a few, I'll just go through a few basic human anatomy things that, um, to me, sort of stand out, that are generally universal, that are dependent on style. So I'm not sure if realism was the goal here, or if a stylized portrait was the idea. But essentially, you have the cranium of the skull, right, and the spine that comes down. When you add a face, so the ears are well placed. I'm drawing them a little bit bigger, sort of around. So the ear here, generally the top of the ear is going to hit the eyebrow, so that's good. You have This eyebrow bone, good. The length of the nose looks good. The bottom of the nose generally comes to the bottom of the ear. So this could be a little bit off. Like I said, I don't have the reference photo of the individual, but it looks like the nose is just a little bit too high. From here, the jaw comes down, uh, and then it will extend out. And then from the base of the nose, it usually has a smooth tilt back generally. Uh, there are several deformities of the jaw that people have, whether it's an underbite or an overbite, and the jaw can move and change the position quite a bit. But you'll notice that the mouth is really, really close to the nose. In fact, it's far too close to the nose. Um, generally, the mouth opening is roughly between the nose, the base of the nose, and the bottom of the chin. So the mouth is quite a bit too high, too close to the nose. You would have the upper lip sort of forming like this, and then the lower lip, something like that. So the mouth looks a little bit too high. And then also the distance here versus the distance here is far too distorted. So the distance, uh, the eye from the side, the eye is really foreshortened, and you sort of get this shape here. So this is sort of the side shape of the eye, and then you have the eyelid like this. Eyelashes sort of come like that. So that's sort of a general shape of the eye from the side. You have that pretty close. You sort of have it really small though, and it should be quite a bit lower from the eyebrow. The eyebrow is far too close to the front of the face. The eyebrow would be more like this. The eyebrow extends, like if I turn sideways, the eyebrow is short and then it comes back across the face. And then you have that part underneath the eyebrow and then the eyelid. So you have the eyebrow and then the eyelid, and they sort of come like this. So sort of a shape like that, and then the eye, and then the bottom eyelid, something like that. So your eye is far too small, far too close to the nose. The eyebrow is far too short, and too close to the nose. So those are some general anatomy things that sort of stick out to me in this particular drawing. My guess is you freehanded this like character from Pirates of the Caribbean. It sort of looks like he has this piratey feel to me, the headband and the beard and stuff. But yeah, anatomy wise, it's a little bit distorted in the eye placement and the mouth placement are the biggest things here that are quite a bit off. But yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail with this project, but I thought that a simple anatomy uh, discussion here would be the most beneficial for the project. All right. Then Chris submitted also this project, which I forgot to resize. And this came out really, really good. Like this project here is very, very good. Yeah, you did a great job on this pastel project here. Yeah. Um, there's not a whole lot that I would say that needs to be talked about. Colors are good. Texture, direction on the wood is good. The background, your background's better than mine. Like it's so much smoother. Your background, actually, I think of all the people's projects that I saw that did the orange project, I think your background might be the best. Like it's better than mine. I don't even think mine looks that good. in comparison to yours. It's like really, really soft. I see, I only see like very, very soft horizontal lines, which is basically ideal for that kind of background. You want the direction to not exist, but if it's going to exist, you want it to be horizontal because those horizontal lines hide better. Where I think that you need to improve this a little bit is again that red, the red that I forget who's. I think it was maybe Linda. Um, her orange. So that transition color, that red that runs through here, that color needs to pop out just a little bit more. You can see that once I add that bit of red, it sort of helps that transition between the black because it was really black on that side of the orange, and it helps make that transition feel more natural when you have that red, that really bright red intermediate color. Those transition colors are really, really important for gradients. So more red, and then also the texture of your highlights is incorrect. So the highlight the highlight should be more of a collection of dots, like a constellation, and less of a singular spot of brightness. So it should be sort of like this because the highlight and the shape of the highlight itself is what also adds to the texture of the orange. So you can see what doing dots for the highlight, a collection of dots, does to the texture of the orange. So here's your orange before with sort of just this singular spot of brightness, and then here's the texture. You can see how transformative the texture is when it includes the highlight. So the highlight itself is sort of a constellation of dots and small shapes. And as you get to the brighter part of it, it's just a more dense part of the constellation. There's just more dots closer together, and then they sort of spread out as you get further away from that concentration of brightness. But you can see how adding the highlight as a texture and not just a singular spot really increases the overall illusion of texture of the skin of the orange. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, project looks really good. Careful on the haloing. So there's a little bit of haloing around the orange right here. So make sure you get the wood color all the way up to the edge of the orange. I can see some of the paper showing through. Fortunately, you use the looks like the maize color toned uh, pastel mat, so it sort of works to your benefit because it shows through on the wood and it actually works quite well. But there is a little bit of haloing around. Yeah, fantastic work. Thank you for all the submissions, Chris. All right, up next is Brandon. He did, this is an older colored pencil tutorial of a hand. And he did mention that this is his first time doing a hand. It appears to me that he freehanded it, no pun intended, and it did pretty well. So quick anatomy, just go through a little bit to think about. So the arm here, obviously sort of a cylinder. The hand, you can think of sort of being like a rectangle. Bottom here, and then it comes out. And then the middle finger, if you look at my hand, if the middle finger here is the highest finger, so the pinky needs to come down a little bit because this will wrap up kind of like this, and then it will come down for the index finger. And it sort of has a shovel type shape like this. And so here's the joint for each finger, and this is a three-dimensional object. So you don't see that line, that's on the back side. And then of course, with this shape, with this curve here of the top of the hand, the fingers will always follow that. And your fingers are pretty good as far as following that, but the base of your fingers, not so much. Not only do the tips of the fingers, they follow that all the time, proportionally, with natural hand poses. Obviously, I can do this with my hand. This is not a natural hand pose, but as we grab our fingers naturally, like without thinking about it, they naturally continue to follow that same contouring curve, with the middle finger always leading the pack. The middle finger is always the highest. Like even as I close my hand, my middle finger is still higher than my index finger. And when you make a fist, you can see that the middle knuckle is the highest knuckle. So the joints here always follow that curve. And with that, so do the joints of each finger, which here you can see they don't quite follow that same contouring line. So this is where your fingers look a little awkward in your drawing here. And then the thumb also, the second knuckle, that knuckle of your thumb falls in line with the contour of the joints of your finger. Now here the thumb is in front, so you can't really use that to your advantage, but this joint here should be sort of about that level, so it's pretty close to where you want the thumb. But yeah, the drawing itself is pretty good. Oh, I just realized I drew all that on top of the layer. I got to undo it all to see the actual artwork. I always forget to do that, to add a transparent layer, and I can't go back any further. Let me see here. Maybe I can just grab the original reference. Yeah, anyway, so just quick anatomy. I actually, maybe I don't need to grab the reference here. Quick anatomy tips, I guess, or tricks for the hands. The colors, I do remember Brandon used a different brand of colored pencils, so he sort of translated the colors. One thing, more layers. Same thing that I was discussing earlier with the male figure project. I think on Chris's submission of that. Don't be afraid to push your colors, push your values to the point where you think you're going to mess up. You're always going to, even if you do mess up, if you push it too far and you mess up, you're going to still end up with a better result than if you don't push it. So don't be afraid of getting some darker colors, darker values into your hand, and then use those darker values to balance out the values for the rest of the parts of your drawing, or your hand here in this case. Because at the very worst, you're just going to have a darker hand, which is better than a hand that is sort of washed out and doesn't have very much contrast in it. Oh, hey there, Brandon. I was just talking about your hand. All right. Moving on, I got several submissions here from Diane. Now, with Diane's project here, the background could be softer, and Yeah, the background could be softer. There's a little bit of uh, clear distinction between the values. So I'm super. I love this project, Diane. You did like an amazing job. The black sort of has this line that separates it from this other color just a bit too much. That could be a camera thing. So I won't talk too much about it. But if the background was smoother and the gradient was softer, wow, your orange. When I saw it, I was like, wow, that looks super super good. Your highlights on your orange are by far just the best that I think you could possibly do. Your orange looks so good. Okay. Um, the stem, everything about it. The orange is in a league of its own. The background is not as good as the orange, which is fine because your orange is so good. I don't even care about the background. Uh, I was looking at it when I was the reason I was a little bit late starting today is because I was trying to get everybody's artwork in here, and I started like an hour ago. So it took me some time to sort of organize everybody's artwork because I got quite a bit more submissions than I did previously. But I had to pause a little bit when I saw your orange, and I was just like I was looking at the highlights. I was like, wow, it just looks so good. Um, if I had to be super picky about the orange, I'd say the transition between the black and the red still could be a bit more gradient. It could be a bit more gradient there, but I love the way the orange looks so much that I don't really think it's even necessary because the highlights just mesmerize you. The highlights are just so good. Like I was looking at yours and mine's sitting back here and I was like, man, I wish my highlights looked that good. Um, yeah, but it looks super super good. The nails also the nails that are sticking in the wood look really good. I think what throws me off just a tiny bit with your wood table surface is there's a bit of distortion with this line here. Like, I'll just follow it all the way across. It catches my eye that the right side dips and curves. It has this subtle curve to it, which creates this very very subtle illusion that your orange is so heavy that it's making the wood flex like right where it's sitting. Like anybody else get that illusion? Like the orange is so heavy that the wood is actually sinking in where the orange is sitting. Um, that's about the only thing with the wood table that I wanted to mention. Otherwise, yeah, this project came out really really good. So fantastic job on that. You need to get with Chris. Yeah, get with Chris and figure out how she got her background to look like that. Get your background to look like Chris's, and then I'll have nothing to say. I'll be asking you for lessons. Um, all right. So here's Diane's male figure. Oh, okay. You couldn't quite see what was wrong there. Yeah, yeah. We all fall into that sometimes. I need a drink of water. I think let me see if I the color seems a bit off here. Let me see if I can make a subtle color adjustment. Yeah, that's way not right. A little bit too much. That that feels better to me, right? That looks more natural. This one looks okay. I don't know, maybe I didn't make it any better. Yeah, I'll just leave it original. It's hard to say when there's not something gray, pure gray or pure white in the image to make a good adjustment. Just something uh, felt a little strange with the color. Uh, you used soft pastels instead of pastel pencils. That makes sense. That makes sense. We should have all just used soft pastels for the background, myself included. I thought about it. I did. I did. Uh, anyways, yeah, this came out really good. Yeah, this came out really good. The A good example of this really dark shadow here on in the center of the back, you can see how dark it is. Very nice curve of your gradient shifting from this really dark area in his back and shifting into some nice reds and oranges and yellows in his muscles. This line here needed to come out a bit more. So his lateral muscle really sticks. Like you can really see his lateral muscle there. So that area needed a bit more of that curve. Um, Rib cage looks good. I can see the ribs. Now the ribs should curve like this, right? Because he's leaning, and so the rib cage is sort of here, and then the ribs come down, and then in the front the ribs curve up. So you're gonna have a shape like this, and then it comes into the front and turns up. So on that part of his body, the ribs are turning this way more. And your shadows, so here the ribs are coming up towards the back and hitting the spine here in the middle. But here the ribs, it turns over and it curves the other way. So this shadow here doesn't quite get, it's not quite the right shape. So that shadow is just a little bit off. This dark spot, if it was down a bit more, sort of right in this area, that's where that shadow should be, the shape of that shadow. So just slightly off with the rib cage. This line here and where this point comes in, this is the like the base of his shoulder blade, and where his actually I don't know the name of this muscle right here. It's there's something going on here. Yeah, there's something going on here. I don't have the reference photo in front of me. Maybe if I grab my drawing. Okay, yeah. So I know what it is. I know what it is. Um, this highlight that you have right here, it's a bit too bright because his shoulder, the shadow of his shoulder actually comes down, and then the highlight is like this. Highlight. This is the highlight here, and this is supposed to be a shadow. So this is a little bit darker. And the way that you have it here with the highlight coming down and pinching in here, it sort of feels like he's being pinched right here. Like it sort of feels like a squeeze. And that messes up the structure of his shoulder. I don't know how well you'll see this on camera, but here's my shoulder. And you can kind of see the different shape in our highlights. This highlight in particular, and it's sort of creating a little bit of a pinch there. Um, let's see. It could be the photo, like great colors. Like I can clearly see the reds and the oranges. I think that you could have pushed the color a little bit more in this shadow. So this shadow is one of the more complex shadows because it sort of had, it was like a dark gradient moving into an even darker color into a dark gradient and then immediately into a highlight that runs along his lateral muscle. So that this is probably one of the more difficult parts of coloring for this project because it was quite difficult to do, and it feels a little bit too gray. Um, More red here to bring some more life into the skin. Pushing the colors further in his skin, I think would have gone a long way. This whole section here is is really difficult, really difficult. And what I'm seeing, what I'm seeing in the three examples now that we've looked at, so Linda's, Chris's, and then yours, all three of you are sort of relying a little bit too heavy on black, dark brown to get those values, and you're sort of losing. And this is the hard part of this project, right? The hard part of this project is that we took a black and white photo and we were adding color to it. We were colorizing it, and you're you're just not colorizing the really dark values enough. So that's where you're going to get into some trouble with the skin sort of drying out, not feeling as life. Yeah, but this, I mean, this is a tough project, and I realize how difficult it will be for everyone trying this project. But um, yeah, the dark values need to have more color overall. So I guess I could, maybe I can pull up mine really quick just to show you as an example of the difference with the amount of color that you'll see in my drawing versus the amount of color that you're seeing in the examples that we've gone through. So here's my version of this project, and you can see the difference in, you can see the values, right? You can see the values in mine. If I turn it black and white, you can see still how dark this is. Let me take yours and turn yours black and white too. So value wise, it's quite similar. Where am I? Oh, did I draw? Where did I draw that? Oh, there it is. Value wise, I mean, with the exception of the paper and the photograph, my photograph is a little bit brighter than yours. But value wise, you can see that our dark values, they take place in the same areas. So really good in that regard. But as soon as we shift it back to color, um, as soon as we shift it back to color, you can see that mine has more red, it has more orange, it has more yellow, it has more life in the skin. And that's partially due to how much color I pushed into those really dark values. So I used a lot of the red and a lot of the orange in those really dark values because I didn't want them to just be dark. I also wanted them to be color. So that's sort of where uh, all of you have missed the mark a little bit on this particular project, but you know don't feel bad in any way about it because this project was very difficult to do. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the only thing that everyone that seems to have struggled with the most with this project is just pushing more color into the dark values. Yeah, had such a hard time with them. Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, not only would I say that this is the, as far as anatomy goes, the back I find to be the most complex. There's so many muscles that are overlapping on the back, and his pose, the asymmetry of the muscles and everything. makes this project just exceptionally difficult, not just to draw, uh, but also to take the black and white image and add color to it. So there was so many layers of difficulty with this project. Um, I'm glad that I'm glad to see so many people trying this project because it is a really big challenge, and all of you've done really well. By the way, Diane, your hair looks really good here. The hair looks amazing. Um, but yeah, all right, I'm gonna move on. Um, and if anybody has any questions about that particular project, I think that's the last one I have. No, I have Susan for sure. I think. Yeah, Susan has one. Cherry, did you do it? Yeah, I have cherries here as well. So I have a couple more to go through, which you'll probably just hear me reiterate some of those same points. So I'll probably not talk too much about it more. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do another colorizing project again in the future. Yes, for sure. Okay, let's just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Try my best not to miss any questions. All right, so this is an older project. It feels like a million years ago, but we didn't do it too long ago. Um, of the chess pieces with the 12 pack of polychromos, and yeah, this came out really well. There's a few lines that I see, so again, just be careful with outlining in the use of graphite. But yeah, spot on colors. The orange, it was like, let me see here. It was pretty orange. So the shadow had a lot of orange in it. This reflective orange from the bishop itself. So the shadow needs to have a little bit more orange in it. You saw the same orange sort of right here in the bishop. Um, it could be the photograph, but I think the rook could also use a bit more blue in it. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's really good. There's not a whole ton to talk about on this project. I mean, it came out really well. I actually gave my original away. I don't have mine anymore. I gave it to a friend, um, and so he has it. But yeah, this one came out good. Just be careful with the outlines. That's really it. All right. Up next, I have Susan. Now the photograph here is a little bit distorted by light, so I'm not going to talk too much about the color. Um, yeah, it looks like you had a little bit of struggling with the hands. The hands are difficult. One thing that I see that you did with the hands that you just want to make sure in the future, Susan, try not to create outlines. So outlining, I can see like an outline on the fingers a little bit. So just be careful with outlines. You want to avoid those. Um, the hair looks great. Yeah, the hair looks really great. Good texture, all of that. Again, so like I said, I'm not going to judge the color too much because the photograph sort of the light from it is distorting it. But I would like to see a bit more orange in the skin for sure. I can't quite see the orange in the skin. I can see plenty of red, but I can't see the orange that that I think needs to be there. And then the same thing that I mentioned with Chris's project. Don't be afraid of the dark values the in the skin. So don't be afraid of using black. Don't be afraid because the value sort of like around here and this shadow and the shadow on the elbow and the forearm is the same that you have here in the small of his back. And in the small of his back, it's very dark. Like it's really dark there. So just don't be afraid to push those values a little bit further. Also, the rib cages here, um, the shadows there, you don't want to make them lines. You want to make them shapes. Okay, so be careful with lines. So the shadows for the rib cages, for the rib cage in this particular project, they weren't lines. They were shapes, and they sort of had like this kind of shape, and then it would come down and repeat, and then it come down and repeat. So it's sort of like this abstract shape that creates that illusion of the rib cage sort of showing through a little bit. Um, so avoid using lines, and then your rib cage will immediately look better. Also, the placement of your lines is just off a bit. Uh, like there should be like a shadow of a rib cage there, shadow of a rib cage there, and it's fairly evenly spaced on that side. Like the rib bones are pretty evenly spaced, so it should be, you know, evenly spaced in your drawing as well. And then Susan also did this really lovely pastel work. This is honestly, Susan, this is probably one of my favorite pieces that I've seen you do. The light on the moose is really good. The antlers just look so cool in this piece. Um, all of the little textures and the flowers and stuff like this look really good. I love the colors that you used. Very the colors are very harmonizing in the foreground. I'm not 100% sure what your intention was for the background, whether you wanted sort of like this green misty sky, or if it's meant to be like trees in the distance. I have to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what the background is supposed to be. But even though I can't totally discern whether it's supposed to be like a green sky or like mountains with trees in the background, uh, both, regardless of which you choose it to be, if it was softer, then your moose and your foreground would just stand out that much more. So let me artificially smooth your sky. So I'm just going to blur everything. That's probably all I need to do. Let me just grab this, invert, brush, and I'll just sort of smooth out the sky here. I'm just going to do this quick, easy. So if your sky slash background, I think it's a blurry background. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't 100% sure if it was just a blurry background or if it was supposed to be a green sky. I was torn because it sort of looked cloud-like in some areas. It sort of looked cloud-like, and honestly, the ambiguity of it is cool. I like the ambiguity of it, not being able to decide exactly what it is. But if you soften it, I mean, just look at the difference. Like the difference is small, but significant at the same time, because all of a sudden your eyes are no longer distracted by what the background is or isn't. Instead, the softness allows your eyes to just focus right in on the moose, and it just adds a deeper atmosphere to the project overall. So try in the future to really be delicate with the backgrounds, with whatever blending tool you prefer, the soft tool, or like a like a blending sponge, or a paper blender, or whatever you'd like to use. And that's immediately going to just pull more attention into the foreground. The other thing that I would add, now the color harmony in this project overall is quite good. I can see some hints of the green from the background. I can see some of these greens in the foreground. But where I'd like to see them, like this dark green here, I think would have benefited to show up at least a little bit in the moose itself. So a little bit of this green sort of coming into the moose's fur. Uh, and then maybe some of these dark browns a little bit. I can see some of the dark browns, but I think a little bit more beneficial. Also, this bright green, if I just brighten it up a little bit, some of this bright green, instead of having the highlights of the antlers, sort of this obvious yellow, if they were tinted green, they sort of fit inside the atmosphere a little bit while still maintaining that lighting effect. And then also you could take this bright color and you could use it on your moose to define the light even more. So here, like a little bit of a rim light, and then along the edges of his fur here, you could use this to cut him out of the background a bit more also. So maybe his front leg showing a little bit, something like this. And yeah, you have a little bit of that edge light. And I think it could have come out even more. You could use this bright green for I'm overcomplicating it, but you could use it as a secondary light source, a reflective light, a bounce light. So a bounce light would be coming from this direction, where the dominant light is coming from this direction. And then even beyond that, you can take your really dark value, your really dark value, and really give him a very, very dark cast shadow. Look at this, look at what this cast shadow does, right? That cast shadow just really makes him pop out. So here's the original. If you just soften that background a touch, and then here's some extra little sprinkles on top with some lighting. The dominant light source creating this really stark contrast drop shadow, and then also a bounce light that reflects the background into the fur. But anyways, I sometimes get carried away because you guys submit such great work. Anyways, hopefully that gives you some ideas in the future. And then this project here, I think you did this with colored pencil. I can't remember. It doesn't, the sky looks like pastel. It's probably pastel. But you sort of used the reference photo of the Aspen Mountains and then translated it into a different foreground. And this would work, like this works to some degree, but this is another perspective problem. There's a slight perspective problem here, and that is the perspective of the right foreground does not match the perspective of the left foreground. So it appears as though it's standing in a creek or river, and so let's just have a look at the perspective a bit. So the horizon line, you could argue the horizon line is here, the top of the mountains, but really the horizon line is your eye level. And for the perspective of this particular piece, the eye level is more here, a little bit here. Now this is a hill, so the hill is coming down, but the eye level is kind of there. You can tell the eye level is there because if you put your moose in a box, that's the top side of the box, and you can see the top side of the box, right? And this is sort of the box that you would fit your moose in a little bit. It's not the best free-handed box, but that's sort of the box. and then the head being a sphere, and then, okay, I won't draw anymore. But essentially the convergence line in the center here, right? You fit your moose inside this rectangular prism, this box. This tree here, if you fit this tree into a box and you converge it, then the scale of this tree, it it's about twice the height of your moose. But if you look at this tree here, you fit it in the box, and it comes down. Well, first off, look at where it starts. It's starting really it's starting a lot closer to the vanishing point, which if I were to compare the size of this tree here, to this tree is like this tall. Like it would take up all that space if I were to move it closer to us. And this is where the scale of things change. So if I were to take, I know this is getting a little convoluted here. Let me get a different color. Let me go with like purple. If I take this shape here, this tree right here, and I move it back, like I'm moving it towards the vanishing point, right here is halfway, which is about where this tree is, right? Look at the size difference. It's a little bit more than half the size. So it's, if I bring this shape forward, then it's the same size. But if I just look at this shape isolated versus this shape, it's almost half the size. So the general rule of thumb with perspective is that if you go halfway to the vanishing point, so halfway in terms of that distance, going halfway, the size decreases by half. That's just a general rule. It's not the reality, but it's a general rule. So this tree over here, this tree, the size of it being as big as it is, being that much closer to the vanishing point, it distorts the perspective. And this is something that you have to be able to recognize when you're creating these scenes so that the perspective doesn't break. And here it does a little bit. It does a little bit because, because it does. Sorry, I drew all those lines just to say that the perspective is just a little bit distorted here. Truthfully, what really is sort of going on in this project is the horizon line shifts. You have a horizon line here and you kind of have a horizon line here. These objects sort of converge to a different vanishing point where these objects converge to a second vanishing point that is higher than. So that's really what's sort of going on. But it still looks cool. It still looks cool. If you want to help, if you want to help yourself in these situations dealing with perspective and you want to simplify it, then what you want to do, first you want to address your horizon line. Just get that started. That's going to be simple. You don't have to concern yourself with the vanishing point of your project. Like, you don't need to have a vanishing point when you're setting this up. But if you want some assistance, take a vanishing point. So I'll just do an arbitrary vanishing point, and then take your lines, get a vertical line, and then just get a few lines to your corners, this, I would recommend doing this for like the sketching part. Split those in half wherever you have more detail, right? Split them in half, and then draw some horizontal lines. Draw some horizontal lines. Oops, something like that. Get yourself a grid. Get yourself a grid like this, and now, you put your moose in here. This is now a moose. That's a moose when I draw it with a mouse. Here's like your river. I mean, maybe draw with a different color here. This is anybody tunes into this live stream when I'm doing this, it's just going to look like a joke. So here's your river. See how your river starts to converge. Your mountains can do whatever they want. Your mountains, they don't have to follow any particular perspective, but you have mountains. Say you have a tree here. Here's a tree, and you want to put a tree here. Well, if the tree height is generally the same height, then that tells you that your tree needs to fall within somewhat of a degree of the vanishing. Even if that tree shifts, even if you put this same tree over here, well, guess what? It's still the same height as this tree, because this line here, you have that horizontal line to help gauge scale. So if you have a big tree on the side here, if it converges like that, and you want to put another tree, so you have this, and you put a tree here. I cannot draw with a mouse. There. And that's how you keep scale. That's how you keep this scale uniform within your scene. So yeah, that might help you out for the initial sketching stage, sort of the brainstorming idea of what you want to create. Thank you so much, Susan, for the submissions. All right, I wasn't sure how to pronounce Sint. I think it's pronounced Sint. I didn't notice her in chat, but she did this really lovely looking butterfly, and the only thing that I wanted to talk about with this project is drawing technique, because from my perspective, she freehanded this, which is fine. Freehanding is always good practice. So let's talk a little bit about some drawing techniques to help you freehand faster and more accurate. And again, for those of you that don't know, hello, Daniel, by the way. For those of you who don't know, if you want to get better at drawing right now with zero practice, learn the grid method, period. Just learn the grid method. And that will immediately take you from beginner to intermediate, essentially overnight. Like in one drawing, you will immediately be better at drawing if you just learn the grid method. And once you learn the grid method, you can cut back on using the grid method once you're proficient in it. I think the other day I was talking about how long I did the grid method for. I used the grid method for like 10 years, on and off, but relatively consistently for 10 years. It was something that I was always using. Now I don't really have to use it anymore because I just do it in my imagination. So when I look at this butterfly on the left, which is the reference photo, and I look at the butterfly on the right, which is the drawing of it, I can already see a lot of things that were drawn inaccurately, which, if they were drawn accurately, would immediately make this butterfly on the right, the drawing, look that much better, because it looks cool. The thing about butterflies is they don't have to be like a perfect shape to look cool, because most of what makes the butterfly look cool is the contrast in the colors and the pattern of their wings. So it doesn't really matter what the rest of it looks like. However, if your goal is to draw more accurately, then all you need are vertical and horizontal lines. You just need vertical and horizontal lines. That's all you need. So let's look at the cocoon, which I'm pretty sure this is the cocoon the butterfly came out of. So let's just look at fitting this cocoon into a box. Okay, so I'm just going to fit this cocoon into a box, something like that. So if you imagine, no matter what object you're drawing, doesn't matter what object you're drawing, just fit it into a box like this. Well, as soon as you fit it into a box, then use simple lines to establish the shape. That is a lot easier to draw. A box, a triangle, another triangle, and technically 3 more triangles on the bottom, far more easier to draw. And then all you do is you remove the box from your sketch, and then you just add the subtle curves. All you have to do is add these little curves. And all of a sudden you drew the cocoon. So you have that. Congratulations. Now what you do is you make a new layer first, is once you have that first object established, use that object to measure other objects. So for instance, I have the cocoon drawn, so I have this shape, right? So we just drew the cocoon. Again, we're just going to use vertical and horizontal lines. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this edge of the cocoon. I'm just going to draw, imaginarily, I usually draw these vertical lines, but you can physically draw them as well. And what does this tell me? This tells me that the butterfly exists completely on the right side of this line. Okay, that's fairly easy. What else I can do is I can roughly estimate this bottom edge, but truthfully, not really. What you could do, if you want to be more slightly advanced, you can use proportions. So if I take the size of this and I add it here, and then there's like this little sliver. So I can sort of roughly estimate that putting 2 more cocoons and then maybe a little bit extra, that's about where that bottom line, this line here, that's about where that bottom line exists. So now I'm fitting this butterfly into a box. You could roughly estimate this the same way if you take the distance of here and you realize that it's about the same distance as here. That's proportional drawing in a nutshell. But I just do this sort of, I generally measure it with my eyes. And so I now have my entire drawing inside of a box. I can use this bottom edge to guesstimate the head of the height of the head of the butterfly, also the body. So I can see that the body a little bit, if I take that edge, I always use like corners and stuff. And I think I can sort of guesstimate this bean shape. I can guesstimate the bean shape. Now what I'll do is same thing as I did with the cocoon, I'll sort of draw these triangles. These triangles like this. Maybe from here down to there. That's pretty close to the overall shape of the wings. And then all I do is, bring this line out a little bit, add these little spiky things, cut this in a little bit, and then boom, I have the shape of my wing. I have all of the general shapes of my butterfly. My drawing is 1,000 times more accurate, and it takes you 5 minutes when you get good at it. And that's how you draw in a nutshell. You deconstruct, you simplify, and then you complicate. So that's sort of what you do. Deconstruct, find each little object, build it in a box, and then generalize the shape, and then complicate that generalized shape. So simplify it with triangles or circles, and then smooth out the edges. That's basically what it is. Just just learn how to draw a box. If you can draw a box, then you can draw anything else. I promise you. So yeah, really, really cool butterfly. Just practice on your drawing a little bit. Really, really cool octopus here as well. Um, this is this is a cool project for sure. There was only two things that I really wanted to discuss with this particular project. The first thing is value. So you want to create this illusion of light. And pop quiz for everyone in chat. What are two ways to create light? Like, how do you make your highlights or your light look brighter? What are the two ways? Yes, indeed, I do. Thank you for bringing that up, Brandon. So I do have a tutorial on the grid method in the art club. Yes. You might have to scroll back through the lessons a little bit, but there's a search option that is labeled miscellaneous. It is under miscellaneous. I'm going to get a drink of water while you guys answer my pop quiz question. What are two ways to make highlights look brighter? Yes, exactly. One of the best ways to make your highlights look brighter is to make the surrounding colors darker or to actually make the highlights brighter. But one of the most overlooked ways is to make the colors surrounding it darker. And in this case, I want to see them darker. I want to see all this darker. Give me a second, I'll fix the weirdness. Let me go with, let me blur this a little bit. It's just Gaussian blur. That's not blurry enough. What the heck is this? I've never, it drives me nuts that they change Photoshop so much, I swear. Blur, blur, blur. Gosh, why is that so weird? It looks so weird on my screen for some reason. Let's just go to multiply, change the opacity a little bit, add one of these things, bring back this. I used to, I don't like the way the cursor looks in Photoshop anymore. It looks so awful. It looks, oh gosh, why does it look so bad? I'm just using a normal brush. Like, it's just so, like, that just looks so awful. So I want to see this darker. That's going to make your light immediately seem brighter. The other thing that I want to see, that I would like to see, is the texture. You're missing the texture, all the lovely texture in the octopus. If you look at the reference photo, it looks like veins sort of just coming down. Kind of like this. It doesn't even require much effort or technique. Just literally squiggle lines coming down the octopus. And this little texture that runs across the octopus, like, it just adds so much interest in it. And these are just squiggly lines. Just squiggly lines. And it just immediately looks cooler. Right? That texture there is just what's missing, and they come down a little bit farther, but I'm trying to speed this up a bit because I'm getting real hungry heading into the second hour. But yeah, those are the two things. So darken the values around the back there so that the light coming from the top looks brighter. And then don't forget the texture. Yeah, add the texture. Just some squiggly lines there on the octopus. On the octopus. All right, up next is Cherry. Got two projects from Cherry here. First one, really, really good orange. Wonderful texture in the orange. Yeah, it looks great. Same thing. I want to see more red in that transition between the shadow. I'll add some of the red. So I'm just gonna grab a red. Let's turn down flow. Let's go here. I'm just gonna throw in some red. Look at that transition. Boom. The transition just immediately, it's like here it's sort of like a flatter transition as it goes from black to orange, but red, and then it's just magic, right? Just like magic. Super, super easy. Just you probably just grab any red in the Carbothello set and just start adding some red there, and immediately it's like magic. It goes from a two-dimensional orange into a much more three-dimensional orange. Background looks good. Sort of feel like the paper is still showing through a tiny bit on the background. The table looks good. You know, one thing that I like this texture here. This texture is a bit more exaggerated to what the texture of the table actually was, but I kind of like it. It almost looks like the wood was charred. Like when people take a blowtorch to wood and they turn it black and then you know, they turn it into furniture. Sort of has that effect. It looks really cool. Nice horizontal directional lines on the wood. Looks good. You don't have a super extra heavy orange like Diane has, so the lines are going up. There's a little bit of lighter value here, so a tiny bit of haloing, like right in here, it just looks brighter. This highlight, well, excuse me, not highlight, but reflection is just a bit too bright. Like it's important to have these colors kind of coming through here. And they can be kind of bright, but I just feel like maybe tone that down just a tad. Just a tad. It looks good otherwise. Yeah. Yeah, this is not much to talk about. You did a really good job here. But more red. Go brighter on the red. And then of course, Cherry's male figure here as well. Same thing that everyone else has sort of struggled with is really enriching the colors in the shadows. Like your form here looks really good. Rib cage looks pretty good too. Yeah, a lot of people struggled with the rib cage. Your rib cage looks quite good. Same issue that sort of Diane had on this part of the shoulder blade rather. These lines are tricky. They're a little bit more delicate than what you have. So just the thickness of them is a little bit off there. The value here. So let me just grab a color so I can circle it a bit more. The value on this part is too bright. It should not match that. So these values are too close to one another. The value here should be darker overall, in comparison to like his bicep and his shoulder. This shape here is just a bit too bright. Maybe some orange, like some burnt ochre or something. Great structure on the arm. Yeah, good structure. Good hands. Yeah, the hands are good. This thumb looks a little goofy for some reason, but it's small, so I'll grant you that. And look at my own thumb. Oh, it's just this connection line here. The connection, his thumb's just too thin right here. Just a little bit too thin on the thumb there. That's what makes it look kind of weird. You have a dark line outlining here, and you don't want that. You want the bright line. Maybe it's the graphite transfer. I don't know. But I mean, this is, as far as color goes, like you got a lot of color here. Like I like the color. Uh, I think that I think that is pretty close. Like you have some nice reds coming from the shadows. Maybe the shadows just need to be a bit darker. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly, but um, as far as color goes, yeah, the colors look pretty good. Partially, I think they're maybe washed out a little bit from the photograph, but they do look good. Yeah, they do look quite good. Same thing. So with the leotard, I don't really want to talk too much about the leotard, but same thing that I think Linda had. Uh, there's no transition colors with your blue, so you sort of have like this white for some of the highlight. You have the like the one blue, and then you have the maybe dark blue black, um, but they're not really transitioning between them. So maybe think about what surrounding colors, because I sort of feel like you have some green in his skin, so maybe you put him outside like I put mine outside. So maybe you could have a little bit of teal or turquoise type colors to help some of those transitions in the leotard feel more natural. A bit more color variation, I think, is what is needed in a leotard. Because you remember, I used like the dark red, and then I used some of the orange and some of the white to help create some color variation. But yeah, that looks good. You did a good job there, Cherry. Good colors. All right, up next is Garima. He has this graphite portrait, and there's not a whole lot to discuss here. This portrait's done really, really well. The one thing that you want to practice is you want to have better defined variations of your values. So partially, I think it's probably the photograph itself because it feels like the whites are kind of crushed a little bit. And what I mean by that is it's sort of mushing all the values together a bit too closely. So it feels less contrast. Like if I just arbitrarily increase the contrast here, like if I just boost up the contrast like crazy, it immediately looks better like that than it does with the original because the contrast feels very low. Maybe it's the like light reflection or something like that. So just make sure if it's not already like this here in person, just make sure that you, whatever your darkest value that you're able to capture with whatever pencils, it almost looks like water soluble graphite in some areas, but whatever your medium is, just make sure that you localize your absolute darkest values to what's most important in the project. So in this case, like his eyes and maybe the deepness shadow of his hood that allows his face to come out of the project. But yeah, just make sure you maximize your values and you only use the darkest values where it's most important. Oh goodness. Uh, Sorry, I wasn't paying too much attention to chat. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss any questions. All right. I don't think I did. So I will move on. Good portrait though. Up next is Barbara. She sent this sort of stylized um, graphic scene, which is really cool. I like this a lot. Um, there's a few tips. There's a few tips here. So um, you could. Oh gosh, I'm getting like really hungry right now, so my brain is just trying to shut down. Uh, so the thing that sticks out here, there's two things. Um, I love the colors. I wouldn't change anything about the colors. The sky has a very particular style, like the sun, crisp, the red, orange, yellow. They're the gradient and transition between the red, orange, and yellow is very small, which is fine. You totally can go with that particular style. or you can make it much softer and have a much softer gradient transition. The issue is that the water doesn't do the same thing. The water, first off, the water is blue, the sky is red and orange and yellow. The, the water is blue because it reflects the sky. So um, the mountains aren't reflecting in the water, the sky is not reflecting in the water, and that's fine. If you want to make that change, that's totally fine. It works. It actually works because the blue complements so well against the sky. Um, but the texture in the water contradicts the style. So if I were to I don't let me see if I can do this relatively. I think I can. So I'm going to just take my lasso tool here. I'm going to replace your water. Did not mean to let go of that. So I'm going to change the style of your water and I'm going to make it match the sky. So let me take your darkest color. Let me give it a little bit of a soft edge. So your darkest color, I'm just going to sort of put it here. Your medium color, I'll put it like here-ish. And a lighter color, I guess, something like that. That's a little bit too, let's go a little bit lighter, shall we? Maybe not that bright. Yeah, I think that works. So here is sort of that same, it's the same way that your sky looks, right? And it matches the style. Obviously, I can't match the texture because I'm doing it digitally, but I could also use match the reflection of the mountains. So the mountains would reflect across the water, across the horizon, like that. I could use blue line to separate the mountain from the water. And then, of course, the sun wouldn't have that deep V that you created. You sort of created this shape where the sun reflects. And the sun would sort of reflect, it would reflect symmetrically, just like the mountains would. The sun isn't special as far as the shape goes, so it would still just reflect one to one like that. That's matching the style that you have in the sky. So that's what your sun reflection would look like, as opposed to like this long V. And then what you could do is you could take the blue and cut little waves. You could add a little bit of texture, a little bit of water illusion into your sky. And this is matching the style of the sky into the water. You could also take each color and cut across. You know, you could add little bits like this where the color of the different colors of your water also creates the illusion of a bit of movement, a little bit of water effect, however you want. Have a little bit of blue in here, have a little bit of lighter blue in here, have a little bit this in here, and this is going to match the style. So just make sure that when you're doing something stylized, that you don't just change the style in one part. If you go back to the original, the way that you have your water, you could modify your sky also to have that same that same style, because the sky has no realism. Like the sky is not realistic. It's a stylized sky. The water is still stylized, but it starts to creep a little bit towards the realism as whereas the sky does not. So you just want to make sure that you marry the the styles across the same image. So yeah, that's all I wanted to mention there. It looks really cool though. I love the colors. The colors are great. All right, now I'm going to talk about the monthly masteries, and I have a few of them here. Overall, these came out pretty well. Much better than the first 2 months, that's for sure. So you guys are definitely getting better with the monthly masteries. So I'm glad to see you're listening. Um, Linda, she did the same one twice, and they came out really good. I noticed. So this line here, why is it black? Definitely choose that color. Um, why is it not going backwards? Is that line actually there? It's not. Um, anyways, this line and this line are a little bit off. So I don't know if you're freehanding this, but that those lines don't match. That's a good vertical line, good vertical line. Yeah, those are all good. It's just these two lines are off. This one actually looks more accurate. The left side looks more accurate. Um, and there's a little bit of a trick. There's a little bit of a trick that pretty much everybody fell for in this in month 3. So we just finished up April's monthly mastery, or at least I did. I showed you how to do it. I introduced reflections and I introduced highlights. And the thing with this project, you have your 0 value, you have your 1, you have your 2, you have your 3, you have your 4, and your 4, and then your 5. And I think everybody did it. Let me just check. Yes. And that's not the one. And the yes. So everybody did it. And that is, they took their 5 value and they added it right here. The cylinder, this is a highlight. So this is a highlight. And I knew that everyone was going to do it. I was pretty confident that everybody was going to do it. Because this was something that we saw in the monthly mastery that I just finished, where we had the cone, like Diane has the cone here. The cone has the highlight, right? You see the highlight that we added to the cone, and that Diane added to the cone. So people used their 5 value. You can see it there, and Diane as well. You can see their 5 value used it as a highlight. And I knew everybody was going to do that because you want to create that gradient, but the color, the value of the cylinder underneath the cube is the 4 value, right? And so that was a little bit of a trick that I let all of you sort of fall for. I told you to do it. I told you to use the 5 value. Did I? Oh, well, if I did, then I apologize. I don't remember. I don't remember if I said to use the 5 value. If I did, then I was wrong. Yeah, if I did, then I apologize. It's not a big deal if you did use it. But yeah, it's a highlight. Yeah, it's a highlight. So I wouldn't want you to add a highlight to this project. And also, looks like you used your 1 value here. So if the shadow and the gradient should all be the 2 value, then your 1 value can't be there. It just looks like you added a little bit of your 1 value here. And I'm just, the purpose of the strictness is for you to be able to identify um, the like the fundamental difference between the shadows before getting them closer to what they're actually supposed to be. Um, but this gradient here could be a little bit softer. It looks better here. This gradient looks good. This gradient looks a little bit linear. But I mean, you did a good job here, Linda. I'm not picking on you in particular or anything. Here's Diane's. I have 2 of Diane's monthly masteries, and then I have 1 from Diana. So I have to not get those mixed up. Yeah, these are good. Good coverage. Nice sharp edge here for that cast shadow. So here was this is a mix between a cast shadow and a gradient. So this is the gradient of the cylinder, and then the cast shadow is a hard line. So that was something that we saw in this project. This looks really good. Gradient looks good. These values look really, really similar. It could just be the photo, but they look close. Yeah, they look really close. Why can I not go backwards? Like, happening. For some reason, my keyboard shortcut is not working. It is Command Z. That is, I'm hitting Command Z. Anyways, computers, they never work consistently. But yeah, those values might be a little bit too close, but overall the project looks good. I'm gonna jump to Diana. Here, everything looks pretty good as far as like value range goes. Yeah, this is definitely 4. This is 4. Yeah, that's 4 and 4. Those match. The better distinction between these 2 values, so good, because this is 1, this is 2. This line could be a little crispier. I would like to see that line a little bit crispier because it's hard to, this transition where the cast shadow comes in and the gradient comes in is not as distinct as I would like. Why is this not working? This is driving me nuts. Why can I not undo anything? What could be the reason? Anyways, Photoshop is acting really weird right now. It's not letting me undo things. Anyways, yeah, this is good. The coverage here is a little flaky, like a paper texture, sort of not really 100% cover, but it still looks pretty good. Still looks good. And then Diane, she asked me yesterday some specifics when I was saying that you can do these projects using color if you want. So she did this month's monthly mastery in color, and it came out really good. Yeah, it came out really good. This reflection, it feels a little too bright. Like it feels like it came out just a little bit too bright, but this undo thing is gonna drive me nuts. But other than that, like very, very solid. So your 1 value, so you used your 0 value here. This is really driving me crazy. The inability, like Command Z is so fundamentally ingrained in my psyche that not being able to use it is really, really driving me nuts right now. Since you made your 3 value, orange, I feel like it should influence your 0 value um, by being at least brown to some degree, because your 0 value here for your cast shadow is pure black. And this is sort of the reason I alluded to using color, but I didn't give you like all the perfect examples. So your 0 value is technically just flat black, where I think it should be maybe like a really dark brown or like dark orangish brown, because the surface of your object is always affected by the value it becomes when you introduce color. Um, yeah, so you change the surface color, so therefore the shadows also have to change accordingly. Yeah, so your 0 value should have had some kind of an effect instead of just being pure black, even though it's really dark in the reference photo. Um, yeah, it should still have some kind of an effect to it. But other than that, yeah, this all came out really well. The other reason I didn't bring color into it is because your reflection is orange. So a reflection also trans the reflection also transposes color. So your reflection, oh my gosh, this undo thing, is absolutely unbearably hard to tolerate. Oh my gosh. Is my keyboard dead? Can I not type anything? My keyboard is working. Like, I don't get what is happening right now. I have none of my shortcut keys are working. I have no shortcut keys. Okay, that worked to change to brush, but why can't I change the brush size? What is this? Okay, there we go. Oh wait, why is it working? Now it's like magically working. Okay, sorry. Technical difficulties, I can't avoid them. So now you have to think about how blue affects orange. And what do we know about blue and orange is they sort of cancel each other out. So you're going to get more of a gray color here. So your reflection of the blue cube into the orange table, you need to think about how those colors affect each other. They affect each other by turning gray because the blue is so light. If it was like a darker blue, it'd turn more of a brown color. But you're sort of pulling the saturation out. You're sort of canceling the saturation. So you can see here that instead of an orange reflection, the blue cube reflecting into the orange is going to turn the reflection blue and cancel out some of the orange. So it's going to turn more of a gray color, sort of like this. Probably not that bright. Probably not that bright. But maybe I can darken it arbitrarily. Maybe it's hard to say. Hard to do this digitally, but essentially you have to think about that effect as well. So just some color things. Yeah, just some color things. Okay, that's it. That's the last project. Yeah. Yeah, it looks cool in color, doesn't it, Cherry? And you can pick, you can pick any color that you want for any of the objects. But uh, so one of the things that I went through when I was talking about using color. Uh, so originally we just have, originally we have our grayscale, our 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you pick your colors, your color for 0, so if I use, let's say in this case orange. So my zero will be, all this layer is like really big. That's why. Um, so my zero value becomes brown. My one value is a bit brighter. My two value is even more brighter. And then my three maybe here. And then my four and my one, or my five, I mean. So this is what you have to create for each object, right? And so for blue, you know, it would be 0 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. And so each color has to have its own scale. That way, like the cone has a cast shadow on the blue cube, and the shadow value is 1. So you need your blue 1 to create that cast shadow, right? And then, of course, I didn't discuss reflection and highlight. Reflection and highlights are affected by color. So again, the reflection of the blue into the orange becomes gray. The light, so if you have a red light or a yellow light or a green light or something like that, then that light influenced the colors as well, but that's getting a little bit too extreme. But yeah, so in this case, Diane used her 0 when she should have used her 0. So she used her gray scale 0 when she should have used her orange scale 0 for the cast shadow. But other than that, it's fun. It's fun. Anyways, that's gonna do it for today. All right, I'm gonna get some food now. I'm super extra hungry. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's live stream. I always enjoy doing these live critiques, even though they wear me out. I swear I don't do this much talking in like a whole week. When I do the live critiques, I need a whole month to rest from them before I can do another one. So that's the real reason I only do them once a month, because goodness, they wear me out. Lots and lots of talking for me. Anyways, Norlene, you posted in the wrong place. Didn't. Oh, what did you? I'm sorry. Yeah, I must have missed it or something. If it's easier for you, you can email it to me when the time comes, or you can message me directly on Discord. You're on Discord, I believe. I think. Um, but anyways, that's going to do it for today. So thank you guys so much for coming by and hanging out. I hope that you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't take any of my critiques too personally. I'm just trying to make us all better artists. Anyways, thank you so much. And I will see you on Monday for 2-point perspective lesson. Have a fantastic weekend. Take care. Peace.